We had big news this morning that NVIDIA is investing up to $10 billion in Anthropic. Microsoft is investing up to $5 billion, and Anthropic has committed to buy up to $30 billion in compute from Microsoft. It is the latest data point in a very interconnected AI ecosystem, and I want to bring on our editor-in-chief, Jessica Lessin, and our Microsoft reporter, Aaron Holmes, to help us break it all down. Jessica and Aaron, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back.
Thanks, Akash. Another big news morning.
It is big all around and so many players involved. Aaron, given that you're the Microsoft reporter, I want to come to you very quickly. Break us down to us the details of the announcement this morning and what stood out for you.
Yeah, so I think what's particularly interesting about this is that Microsoft is essentially, with this investment in Anthropic, winning some of the startup's business away from its rivals, Amazon and Google, who are also shareholders in Anthropic and up to now have been the cloud providers for Anthropic. And at the same time, this shows how Microsoft is getting closer to the arch rival of OpenAI, which had been, up to now, Microsoft's chosen horse in the AI race. It has invested $13 billion into OpenAI and has the rights to reuse that startup's models. And we're basically moving closer to this world where instead of a model provider being closely allied with one or two cloud providers, they're clearly willing to work with all of the cloud providers on the market, while also, scoring investments from those cloud providers at the same time, which is really fascinating.
Jessica, this kind of feels like one of those circular deals that we've seen so much of, right?
Absolutely, Akash. I also think my reaction to this was honestly, what took so long? It was so clear that to fulfill these compute demands, everyone was going to be a customer of everyone. Last time I was on here, I talked about multilateralism. That is the name of the game. And I think what's happening is that the fundraising needs are immense for players like Anthropic. Now, also the compute needs are. So this makes sense until demand shifts, if demand shifts, right? And then we're all in trouble as an industry. But my reaction to this was what took so long. I mean, Aaron was the first to report that Microsoft, in terms of Copilot, was working closely in integrating Anthropic's technology, which was a huge shift when that story came out, because it was the first sign that OpenAI wasn't going to be the only partner on the sort of consumer and business-facing side. And I think these deals are always multifaceted, where each side wants many things from each other. And I think this is the second shoe to drop, and there will probably be more between those companies.
So, Aaron, as Jessica said, you were first to report this relationship between Microsoft and Anthropic getting closer. What do you think this now means for the relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI?
We've seen Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, essentially shouting from the rooftops recently that he doesn't want to just have one giant cloud customer that's driving the bulk of Azure's revenue, which, in the past couple of years has been OpenAI. And we really saw that on the last earnings call, that he was trying to reassure shareholders that Microsoft wouldn't be overly concentrated in its, cloud business for AI customers. So in some ways, this is, proof that he's serious about that by inking this deal with essentially one of the only other AI labs that is willing to spend as heavily on servers as OpenAI. At the same time, Microsoft is still using OpenAI's models. It has the rights to reuse those models for free in its software. And so we're not going to see that go away. And I think, Microsoft is still saying that its strategy is to focus on that OpenAI partnership as its sort of primary AI partnership. But basically, Microsoft is also showing that it's not afraid to diversify and offer its customers even more models from OpenAI's rivals.
Jessica, I want to get your take on how the strategies of OpenAI and Anthropic have compared and contrasted, because we've done some reporting about the focus on efficiency that Anthropic has and the tighter timeline it has towards getting towards actually generating free cash flow. We hadn't seen as many announcements from Anthropic until lately around data centers and around compute. It really feels like they've started to increase the frequency of those announcements. How do you sort of square the differences or similarities in the strategies of these two companies?
Anthropic and OpenAI are very different businesses, and I think headed in very different directions. A week or so, we had the exclusive Anthropic financials published by our Anthropic and OpenAI reporter, Shri, that showed that I think through 2028, OpenAI is scheduled to spend $235 billion on infra, with Anthropic a third of that. So that was one data point that actually shows they have very different strategies, even on the compute forecasting side, which of course is the bedrock for what they intend to do. I mean, they're in somewhat different businesses today, with Anthropic really pushing the enterprise side. OpenAI is kind of going 1,000 miles an hour in all directions right now on the revenue side. We see a huge push with businesses. Sarah Fryer, the CFO, cannot sit at a conference without talking about how many new business customers they've nabbed. And now we have the CEO of applications, Fiji Simo, out there saying our consumer business is going to make money from basically democratizing high-end advice, high-end shopping advice, high-end financial advice. I think that's much more of an open question whether consumers will pay for that or not, given there are a lot of free products out there. So to answer your question, I think their strategies are diverging. And I think it's so useful to see, because I increasingly think a question for next year is going to be, if you spend less on compute, how are you going to adjust? We don't know which projects are actually going to come to fruition. We also don't know what Wall Street is going to say and how much runway they're going to give these companies on CapEx. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to look at, okay, these were our forecasts. Yes, demand is high, but if we're paying a little more attention to the bottom line, investors are more scrutinizing this. Where do you get more efficient? Do you spend less on research? Do you spend less on inference? So it is fascinating to watch. Obviously, still a fierce rivalry between the two, but they give us very two different models on how you sort of top and bottom line going forward. Also on strategic partnerships. I mean, we have been sitting here at the Information the last couple of weeks trying to figure out exactly how Anthropic is going to raise more money. They've got Amazon. They've got Google. You know, I'm sort of saying, oh, duh, now they have Microsoft. Why didn't we think of that? But that is very different from how OpenAI has gone in terms of how it's raising its capital. So it's fascinating to compare and contrast.
Right. Very quickly, Aaron, before we let you go, Jessica mentioned the relationships that Anthropic now has with all three of the big hyperscalers. Do you think this has any meaning of sorts with Anthropic's relationship with Amazon or with Google at all?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's really significant here is that Anthropic is committing to work with NVIDIA to optimize how it trains and runs its models on NVIDIA chips even more so. And so far, you know, Google and Amazon have been very eager to show that Anthropic is using their in-house AI chips, TPUs at Google and, you know, Trainium at Amazon as kind of like the poster child for how their chips can be used. So in some ways, this is, you know, NVIDIA's way to claw back some of that business and show that it still is, you know, the number one destination for frontier AI labs. And I think that it makes it a little bit harder for Amazon and Google to continue to pitch their chips as, you know, being key to Anthropic. However, at the same time, Anthropic said today that AWS is still its most important cloud provider. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Right. Well, Aaron, I want to thank you for coming on. We will let you get back to the newsroom because I know you have more reporting to do. Thanks again for joining us.